Welcome to a new video. Let's take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. The first story is called No Vacation. My father had a job as a mainframe operator for a company that had contracts doing work for state governments. It involved a lot of data processing. His job involved babysitting a group of servers and rebooting them when the monitoring software said they hung, occasional minor programming, and annually talking to the auditor the state, whose contract he worked on, sent in. The auditor loved him because he always ensured they had detailed records ready. Also, the contract specified that absolutely everyone on the contract had to be a US citizen, and the auditor always demanded names and social security numbers. He had about 5 years to go to retirement. In 2 years he would be eligible to retire, 5 until he maxed out his benefits. They really desperately needed somebody to take the night shift, so he took it. He would be allowed to work from home full-time, and he would be retiring soon anyway, and he would save a young married family person co-worker from having to do it. Every fall he and I have a week's vacation together in Disney World because he owns a timeshare there. One year, almost 3 years into the 5, he showed up looking kind of steamed, so after we checked in, I asked him to spill the beans. It seems that his company had decided to sell off the division, and they were purchased by an outsourcing company in India just the week before. The new company told him that he'd have to attend some mandatory meetings during our vacation. When he explained that he had a vacation booked for that time and would therefore be unable to attend the meetings, they said, "No, you don't. Your vacation time was accrued with the old company and they approved the vacation time. You have no accrued vacation time with us, so if you want to take the time, it'll be unpaid and we'll note in your HR record that you demanded time off without approval." He and I already had a few $1,000s sunk into the vacation, so he said, "Okay," and took it unpaid. When he got home, he immediately looked it up and figured out that, if he retired in a few months, instead of waiting 2 more years, he would get about $50 a month less money. He decided that the money was worth it to him, so he started the process. The new employer instantly hired temps from India to work on the contract. My father pointed out to them that he was responsible for proving to the auditor that only US citizens in the US were working on the project, so the company flew them to the US. He pointed out to the employer that they still weren't US citizens. They shrugged, and he figured out that he would be retired before the auditor came around again, so they could deal with losing the contract after he left. He printed copies of his emails to them saying, "You can't do that or you'll lose the contract," and their emails to him, saying they didn't care what he said, and kept the prints to cover his behind. Meanwhile, the new company announced that he had to have a cell phone. The old employer had skipped that because everybody knew that cell phones don't work at his house. It had no coverage from any carrier. But the new company had a hard-on about it. He had to spend several hours doing paperwork about it, and then they sent him one. It didn't work, as expected. So they demanded he brings it into the office in person, which ate a couple of days of his work time, because he had to get to a day schedule, then spend a day driving it in, then go back to a night schedule. When he drove it in, the IT looked at it, and of course, they found nothing wrong, because there was cell coverage at the office. So, the IT took that one and they sent him another one. Lather, rinse, repeat. Then he had to get back onto a day schedule for them to send a technician around to determine where at his house there was an acceptable signal, so they could install a booster. This took several days of his work time, and of course, the tech was amazed that there wasn't any place at his house with any signal at all. They finally sent him a third phone, and he put it in a Ziploc bag and put it aside. Dad had a Windows XP laptop for work, and the current version was Windows 7. He's not an "I refuse to upgrade" person. The problem was that the company refused to pay for upgrades to the monitoring software for the mainframes, and the version they had would only run on XP. The IT department for the new company really wanted everyone on 7 and off of XP. He and all his co-workers refused. However, since they all worked at the office, they'd come in one morning and find they had a shiny new computer, which wouldn't run any of their software, so they were an entire staff of IT professionals getting paid a salary to twiddle their thumbs. My dad wasn't there, so IT couldn't get their hands on his laptop, and he became the only person who could tell what the servers were doing. IT got increasingly nasty about it until they finally cut him off the network entirely, and he had to get his boss to intervene. The time finally came for him to retire. IT had been nagging him several times a day to make an appointment with them on retiring day to give them his laptop and the unused cell phone, and he had to have a goodbye meeting with his boss anyway. So he was going in instead of mailing things. When the day rolled around, he went in, and IT met him first and took the laptop to be wiped and disposed of. Then he met with his boss. They chatted for a while, and then it occurred to the boss that the laptop kind of mattered because it was literally the only computer left in the company with which they could run the vital monitoring software. My dad said, "The IT took it from me an hour ago to wipe it." The boss actually screamed and ran out of the room. My dad waited a while and left. He never saw the boss again. And that's what happens when you don't listen to the people with experience. The next story is called, I expect everyone to wear their best clothing. At the time, I was working as an accountant. There were 7 of us, plus our office manager. We were part of a larger chain, so occasionally, the owner and managing director would visit. Now, our office was located on the outskirts of an industrial estate and the attire was smart casual. Very relaxed atmosphere, and we had a reputation for being the fun branch. Well, as fun as visiting an accountant can be anyway. This story starts like so many others when a new manager comes in. On his first day, a Thursday, we can see he's going to be difficult. He turns up in a gleaming BMW, full suit and tie. Full on a professional look. Attitude to match. At the end of his second day, he sent a branch-wide memo that he expected us to dress more appropriately. That all staff was to wear full business suits, men with ties, women with askets. He also complained that the staff cars were too grubby, our desks were untidy and did not reflect our profession. He also insisted that when referring to each other in phone calls or emails, we called each other by last name rather than the first name, but that has no further bearing in the tale. Now, as I mentioned, we're located on an industrial estate. And the vast majority of our clients were small cell-phone businesses. They already thought we were dressed well, because they'd turn up in messy jeans and t-shirts, driving beat-up old vans. After work, we all went to the pub, without the new manager, and moaned a bit, but thought, he's just flexing his managerial muscles, humor him and he'll start to relax. The following week, we turn up as requested and had our cars washed, desks somewhat tidier. Everything seems to be going fairly well, until the next Friday when we receive another email. To all, whilst I recognize that there has been some improvement in the staff's and office appearance, I feel there is still significant room for further improvement. As you may know, the owner is visiting at 10:30 a.m. on Monday. I expect all staff to wear their best clothing, for desks to be tidy and vehicles to be washed. The new manager. Again, we went to the pub. This time, we schemed. He wanted a good impression, he will get one. I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, you just turned up in really nice suits, better than his, and showed him up. We did, but we did much more too. We contacted the cleaner, who cleaned our office on Saturdays. Ask her if she's okay going overboard on the cleaning. She agrees. Extra work for her means more money for her. One of our clients happens to be in the classic car business, mainly weddings. He's been a client for years and we get on really well. We ask if we can borrow a couple of cars, as all who needed to drive could all carpool in too. He agrees as business was quiet, so long as we pay for the petrol, which splits 7 ways, was totally worth it. Roll on Monday morning, a Rolls-Royce Phantom 3 and a Lagonda, meticulously polished, are sitting in our car park, sunlight glinting off the bodywork. Inside, the desks are completely clear, the metals bins polished, door handles polished, even our filing cabinet handles and our pencil sharpeners had been polished. It looked better than new. The men are all wearing black tie dinner suits with waistcoats, with a fresh rose in the buttonhole. Sterling silver cufflinks. Beards are trimmed or totally shaven, 2 of us even waxed our moustaches. Women are in stunning evening dresses, sparkly jewelry, and fancy hair. We even brought in a hat stand and placed bowlers and top hats on it for extra fanciness. Essentially, we looked like we were expecting to see the Queen walk in. The new manager pulls up with the owner as a passenger. You can see them both look briefly puzzled, but they must have assumed that the classic car client must be visiting, so walk in chatting. His face drops, he stops mid-sentence. He is the worst dressed, barring the owner, who was smart casual, had the scruffiest car and his desk was the messiest. We get eyes that say, if I could fire you all right now, I would. The owner and the new manager go into his office to discuss something. Eventually, the owner comes out. The manager remains in his office to deal with something. The owner catches one of my colleagues to ask what the hell we're doing. Colleague just pulls up the email and says, he insisted we wore our absolute best for you, so we did. Owner stifles a laugh, he can see exactly what we've done. Fortunately, we all knew him and his relaxed attitude, so we knew we'd probably get away with it. He half-heartedly chides us for being petty when the manager is coming out of the office. Once the owner has gone and the manager returns, he writes us a blazing email, saying something along the lines of, you might think you're funny. I don't. If you all want to turn up to work scruffy, go ahead. Look unprofessional. We return to our usual casualness the day after, clearly to his disfavor, and after a few weeks, the manager transfers to a different branch. Our new manager was one of us lower ranks promoted, so the casual atmosphere continued to reign. The new manager snubbed us whenever we saw him, which was fortunately rare. The last story is called, I don't make the rules, I just enforce them. This story happened about a year ago. It requires a lot of context, so I'm sorry about the length, but it's unavoidable. So, I work in college dorms, in a sort of generic first response role. We do a bit of everything, mostly security, but also medical, fire, psych. It's weird and often quite a tough job, but quite rewarding. These dorms are kind of like a gated community a couple of miles away from the main campus. At the top of this village, there's a hub, where all the staff is based. It also serves as a venue for events and has some facilities for students like catering, gym, etc. As well as a few meeting facilities in the staff area, which any department in the college can book out if they so wish. Between the staff parking spots and the back doors, there are also disabled parking spaces. Now, one day, I was coming in for my 10-hour night shift and to my dismay, I found that all the staff parking spots were occupied, which basically never happens. But I knew that the HR department had a big thing there that afternoon, so I figured out what was going on. And though it's not technically against the parking policy, usually, staff who don't actually work in the building are expected to park in the visitor parking bays, not the staff parking. So I had a problem. It was 10 minutes until the start of my shift. I'm not allowed to use the student car parks. What about visitor parking? Well, that gets locked up overnight until after my shift ends. If I parked there, then in the morning I'd have to go unlock the visitor parking, bring the key back, leave, and one of my day's shift colleagues would have to go lock it back up. My only other option was to park down the hill, but then by the time I got there and walked back up, I'd be late for my shift and miss the handover. You see where this is going? I want to make it clear that I would never normally park in a disabled bay. It's generally a scummy thing to do. I'm disabled myself, but not in a way that entitles me to use disabled parking. However, there are a few things to note here. Nobody ever uses those bays, unless we have a disabled person coming in for an event because the back door is keycard access only and there's no bell. So it's little use to students or members of the public unless they've made a prior arrangement to be let in. There weren't any events scheduled that night, and the chances of someone disabled randomly deciding they need to park at the back of the hub, which is near nothing else, unannounced, is negligible, never mind 3 of them. Besides, in the middle of the night, they could just park next to it at the side of the road, because there's about as much traffic there at night as on Route 50. So, I decided I'd park in one of the disabled bays, the one farthest from the door, next to the staff spaces. Due to the long and unsociable hours, I get to take breaks liberally as long as it doesn't interfere with anything. In the extremely unlikely event that more than 2 disabled people had called in to park and access the building, which I'd find out about during handover, I'd just take a break right after starting, drive my car away down the hill and walk back up. I go in, get the handover, and as expected, no one is expected to come in. I was the supervisor for that shift, so I set up my colleagues for the shift, log on, set up the cameras the way I want them, read my emails and turn on my radio. After a while, I get one of the guys, Phil, to cover the cameras, so I can go tell a resident he's getting disciplined for vandalism. I then have one of those golden sitcom moments where I open the office door right before someone was about to knock on it. I recognize her immediately. She's the Dean of Facilities. We'll call her Karen. Now, we're not in the facilities section. We're in the auxiliary services section. So, this lady is not my boss in any capacity. She is, however, far higher up the food chain than me, so it's this awkward situation where, unless I have a great reason not to, I still have to bow down to her or I'll get called into HR for insubordination, especially since the building we're in is technically operated by the facilities section. Some more context, Karen is one of the most hated figures among low-level staff in the entire college, your classic power trip. You can practically see the perverse arousal in her eyes whenever she talks down to anyone on a lower salary than her. And she's pulled no end of downright evil crap in her many years with the institution. So, a startled Karen practically pushes me back into the office. It turns out she was attending whatever event the HR department had on in the building that afternoon, and she was one of the people parked in the staff spaces out back. Now, she doesn't have an office in the building, so by convention, she should be parking in the visitor spaces. But again, that's not technically in the policy. Anyway, she saw my car parked in the disabled bay on her way back to her car. She knows who I am. We've had numerous, always unpleasant, interactions in the past, and she saw my name on the staff sticker in my windshield. Where do you get off thinking you can park in the disabled bay? Well, nobody uses those. So you think you're above the rules, just because it's you who enforces them? Look, it's no big deal. I'll go move the car. No, not on the college's time, you don't. I'll take it off my break. No. Breaks are for relaxation. Moving your car is not relaxation. Well, then what do you want me to do? I want you to issue yourself the standard $70 fine. Are you serious? Absolutely. You need to learn that you don't make the rules. You just enforce them. At this point, I stare at her in disbelief. Now, I have a short fuse at the best of times, and I really want to yell at her, but I value my job. So I swallow my pride and go write myself a ticket. More context here, we're essentially subcontracted by the city to do the parking and traffic enforcement for all roads and parking on college land, so the authority behind these tickets is the city, not the college. I know, if I go talk to that vandal student now, I'll just let off steam at the kid unfairly, when it already wasn't gonna be a pleasant talking to, and I know that sitting and staring at the cameras would just make me seethe. So I go restock the staff kitchen, then talk to the kid, and after that, I get back to the office. Bear in mind that Phil, my buddy who I put on the cameras, witnessed the whole thing. Is she still here? I ask. She's just on her way out now, he says, pointing at one of the cameras, followed by, that's weird, she's leaving through the front. Karen regularly comes here to use the gym at the end of the workday. It's free for students and staff. That's presumably what she was doing today, too, seeing as it's now been a good 45 minutes since she humiliated me. When she does that, she takes a cab home, because she lives at the opposite end of the city and traffic is a nightmare at this time in the evening, and we all know it's a million times less awful being stuck in traffic if it isn't you who's driving. She then takes a cab back in the next morning, to pick up her car and drive to the main campus. It's now that I make a beautiful realization. I pull up the parking policy, scroll through it, and there it is, in delicious bold lettering. It is not permissible for members of staff to leave their cars parked in a staff parking area during non-working hours. It then lists a few exceptions, mainly brakes and stuff like that, none of which apply to Karen. So I'm about to write a ticket when I have an even better idea. You see, our cameras are pretty snazzy. About 6 years ago, all the cameras that monitor the roadways were updated to plate recognition cameras by the city, so now on top of 40 days of saved camera footage, we also have the plate log, which has so far been kept indefinitely, and can be used to figure out when a car entered the compound and when a car left, since we only have 3 entry and exit roads. I explain my plan to Phil. He has absolutely no reservations about doing me a solid and spending time going back through the plate log system, to see how many times Karen has left her car parked here overnight. 4 hours later, and he's assembled all the dates. Over the past 4 years and however many months, weeks and days since the plate system came online, Karen has left her car overnight on a staggering 585 separate occasions. So, I log into the city's Fine Portal software. That's actually what it's called. You can only write tickets for ongoing and momentane violations. If you spot something using auxiliary systems like cameras or what have you after the fact, you need to issue a fine by mail. I put in her office address, and start entering all 585 dates, times, and copy and paste the reference to the exact part of the parking policy, as well as the city statute that gives this policy the force of law, for every single one. The result is a thing of beauty, spanning 13 pages, and totaling $40,950. At this point, all the guys are back in the office, so I call them around, knowing they'll all enjoy this almost as much as me. When I press log and print, I'm hit with a warning I've never seen before: the fine you are about to issue exceeds $10,000. Are you sure you wish to proceed? Everyone is dumbstruck. I start laughing, then Phil, and then everyone else. It's glorious. I print it, stuff it in a windowed, prepaid, city envelope, and put it in the external mail. The city doesn't allow us to use the internal mail nor hand deliver fines. I guess it's for paper trail reasons. The cherry on top is, I then get to also issue a ticket and put it under her windshield because of course, she's also there that night. Of course, the next time I come into work after she receives this, she's waiting for me in the office. What the hell? Do you really think this is gonna fly? Me with puppy dog eyes, what do you mean? The ticket. The freaking fines. Do you really think this will fly? Rules are rules, Karen. You know as well as I do that's never actually been done here. Well, Karen. I don't make the rules. I just enforce them. She leaves without saying another word. Now, there's more to this, some good, some bad. I'll start with the bad. Karen ended up suing. I had to go to court on my day off. The silver lining was I was theoretically there representing the city, and so I wasn't being sued personally and had the city attorney. The court ended up reducing the fine to $10,000, which was apparently the city's maximum for post facto fines issued at one time. I guess that's why the warning was there. But Karen had sued to get the fine dismissed entirely, so it was still a victory. She also tried to take it up with HR, but the Dean of Auxiliary Services also hates her and he stuck up for me to HR, so that went nowhere. The best thing, though? This year, I was appointed to the Auxiliary Services Policy Review Board. Last week, I managed to get the parking policy amended. It now says that, if staff visit a building other than where their office is, unless they are teaching a class, they need to use visitor parking if there are fewer than 20 staff parking bays at the building and there are empty visitor bays. So, starting in June, Karen won't be allowed to park in the staff spots at all. And of course, all of us will be vigilantly enforcing that. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel for more content. Let me know what you think about the stories in the comment section below. Have a great day. Bye bye.